Hello guys, welcome back to our anime explainer. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Soul Land 2 Peerless Tang Men based on novel. So let's start. Dai Hao nodded, yes, it's us. Even though my cultivation isn't the best in the military, I'll personally send you into the air in order to keep things confidential. Don't worry. I have a class 7 flying type soul tool to help me. It should be fine for me to send you 5,000 meters into the air. However, I'm a marshal of 3 armies. After I send you into the sky, I'll need to return to lead my troops. I'll command the Soul Engineer legions to attack for around an hour. You must complete your mission within this time frame. It's still the same advice, safety first. As long as you can come back safely, you've done your part. All right. After Huo Yuhao agreed, he quietly walked to a seat nearby and sat down, waiting for the time to come. The white tiger walked out of the tent and watched as the Soul Engineer legions were deployed. A playful smile appeared at the side of Huo Yuhao's lips. Send me personally into the sky. That's not a bad idea. If that's the case, the effect will be much better than expected. Whether it's life or death, tonight's plan seems to have become more perfect. Tang Wutong kept on watching Huo Yuhao, and managed to catch a glimpse of his smile. When she saw his smile, her heart shuddered. What is this fellow thinking about? How can he still smile at such a time? His smile is even so. 15 minutes was soon up. Dai Luoli rushed in from outside. Everyone, the marshal has instructed you to get ready. Everyone from Shrek Academy stood up and walked out of the tent. Dai Luoli intentionally delayed himself and waited for Huo Yuhao before walking out of the tent with him. He whispered, "Elder brother, what are you doing? What are you going to do tonight?" Huo Yuhao felt warm when he heard Dai Luoli calling him elder brother. He patted his shoulder and replied, "Nothing. Don't worry, everything will be fine." Dai Luoli twisted his lips. "Elder brother, don't get into any danger. I still hope that you'll come back and continue to guide me along. There have been too many things happening over these past few days. I didn't have the time to look for you. When you return, I'll find you, and you can continue to teach me. After that, you must also tell me why you left so suddenly that day. After you left, you don't know how anxious I was. I still thought that the Sun Moon Empire." Huo Yuhao chortled and replied, "Why do you have no confidence in me at all?" Dai Luoli replied, "It's not that. It's just that our enemies are too strong." Huo Yuhao replied, "Luoli, remember something. There's nothing impossible in this world." Dai Luoli was stunned for a moment, before nodding firmly. He had learned many things about Huo Yuhao from Shu Jiujiu and Dai Yueheng over the past few days. Yes. There was nothing impossible in this world. His elder brother was a great testament to that statement. When his elder brother only had 2 rings, he had competed in the Continental Advanced Soul Master Academy Soul Dueling Tournament with his seniors from the inner courtyard. He even turned the tables at the last minute, and preserved the glory of Shrek Academy. Even though Dai Yueheng was already a Soul Emperor back then, he couldn't help but compliment Huo Yuhao when he talked about him. That was 6 years ago. Huo Yuhao was a 2-ringed Soul Master 6 years ago, while Dai Yueheng was a 6-ringed Soul Emperor. Now, 6 years later, Dai Yueheng was already a Soul Sage. However, Huo Yuhao was also a 7-ringed Soul Sage. He even possessed twin martial souls. Dai Yueheng even told Dai Luoli that Huo Yuhao was the future master of the Sea Gods Pavilion. Even though Dai Luoli didn't feel close to Dai Yueheng and Dai Huobin, he still respected both of his elder brothers. He was jealous that they could enter Shrek Academy to learn. However, their talents seemed to pale in comparison to Huo Yuhao. His 3 elder brothers were likely to be some of the most elite soul masters on the continent in the future. Dai Luoli couldn't help but respect Huo Yuhao more after learning about all his miracles. The sky had turned completely dark by now. The white tiger Duke descended from the sky. Evidently, he had just come down from the watchtower, where he had looked on as the troops were deployed. Huo Yuhao received him, and the white tiger Duke said, our men are already on the move. Yuhao, are you ready? Huo Yuhao nodded slightly and replied, anytime. The White Tiger Duke nodded and replied, all right. We'll take action immediately then. As he spoke, he retrieved a flying-type soul tool from his storage-type soul tool and put it on. As a title Doluo, it was still much more comfortable for him to use a flying-type soul tool, even though he was able to fly freely in the air. It was also easier for him to help Huo Yuhao into the air with the help of a soul tool. Huo Yuhao also started to get ready, and put on his own flying-type soul tool. Let's go. The White Tiger Duke stood behind Huo Yuhao, grabbing him below his arms. His soul power surged, and the two of them rose into the air. They ascended in a straight line into the sky. Huo Yuhao's gaze was fixated on a specific position on the ground. At this moment, his gaze was gentle, indistinct, and carried a sense of yearning. It felt as if he wanted to imprint everything that he was seeing into his head. The look in Tang Wutong's eyes was equally indistinct. She had never seen a man's gaze so deep and emotional before. Within all the emotions he was experiencing, there seemed to be one of desolation. Something isn't right. It is unlikely that he has an 80% chance of survival. It might not even be 50%. At this moment, Tang Wutong finally understood everything. However, the White Tiger Duke was already high up in the air with Huo Yuhao. In such a short span of time, they managed to reach more than 1,000 meters into the air as they raced skywards. 8 Soul Engineer Legions were deployed at the same time. Even though they were only there to distract their enemies, almost all of the Soul Masters of the Star Luo Empire had been deployed. At such a time, the mission had to be carried out. This fool. Tang Wutong furrowed her brow. Even though she didn't want to admit it, she was clearly aware that it was highly likely that Huo Yuhao had persisted in carrying out his surveillance of the Death God, because of what had happened last night. Is it really possible for someone to forego his life, because of a romantic relationship? This fellow is really a fool. Tang Wutong clenched her fists tightly. She felt breathless, as if some special power were controlling her innermost feelings. As Dai Hao unleashed his strength, everything below started to become a blur. Huo Yuhao also finally lifted his head. He stopped looking at Tang Wutong, who had become indistinct. Even though she's not Donga, she still looks very similar to Donga. Tonight, I'll treat her as Donga, since I might not be able to survive this ordeal. A slight smile appeared on Huo Yuhao's face. As he sensed the low surrounding temperature, his soul power started to circulate. As the aura of ultimate ice filled his body, the external cold wasn't able to affect him at all. 1,000 meters, 2,000 meters, 3,000 meters. After rising 3,000 meters into the air, the external temperature dropped significantly. Even the White Tiger Duke was slowing down as he continued to climb. Yuhao, how are you feeling? If you aren't feeling comfortable, please tell me. We can stop. I'm fine. Please continue, Huo Yuhao replied calmly. Dai Hao furrowed his brow. From Huo Yuhao's tone of voice, he could evidently sense indifference and coldness. What's going on with him? Don't tell me he's experiencing emotional changes right now. Glancing down from the sky, it was clear that countless Soul Masters were already flying towards the Mingdo mountain range from the Northwestern Field Army's military base. All those who were involved were wearing flying-type soul tools. Even though the operation was jointly carried out by 8 Soul Engineer Legions, there were only 2,000+ Soul Masters involved. They were mainly 4-ringed and 5-ringed Soul Masters, and were widely scattered. From afar, they were subtly creeping their way towards the Mingdo mountain range. There were a few titled Doluo among these 4-ringed and 5-ringed Soul Masters. They were the main commanders of this operation. Even though they weren't really attacking, they still had to make their enemies feel threatened. At the same time, they had to try to minimize their losses. Under such a situation, the titled Doluo were the best candidates to ensure a smooth flow of the operation. Furthermore, they weren't attacking close to the main peak. The Death God couldn't reach them. Of course, there were still other terrifying soul tools that the Sun Moon Empire possessed, hidden in the mountains. Without accurate intelligence, it wasn't feasible to venture deeper. The Sun-Moon Empire was bullying the Star-Luo Empire in terms of its lack of surveillance ability. It was difficult to tell how many soul tools they had planted in the Ming-Do mountain range. After all, the Star-Luo Empire didn't have any credible intelligence. At 4,000 meters, the temperature had already fallen far below zero, and it was falling even further. Every few hundred meters up, the temperature dropped a further 5 to 6 degrees. After 5,000 meters, the temperature was below -100 degrees Celsius. Literally no biological organism would be able to survive at such a height. It was also why high-altitude aerial surveillance soul tools weren't able to develop further. The White Tiger Duke was draining a lot of his soul power. As Huo Yuhao was close to the White Tiger Duke's body, he could clearly sense the explosive strength and immense soul power from him. These were soul power undulations from a titled Doluo. They were strong and consolidated. If his martial soul hadn't followed his mother's spirit eyes, he might have had a white tiger, too. In addition, his destiny might have been completely different. It was his father. This was his father behind him. Naturally, Dai Hao didn't know about Huo Yuhao's complicated emotional changes as he rose into the sky. He only sensed a layer of soul power that seemed to be there, and yet seemed not there in Huo Yuhao. The circulation of qi in his body was also very gentle. Under such low temperatures, Huo Yuhao was less drained than him. No wonder he's a top student, and someone who possesses ultimate ice. 4 to 500 meters. Dai Hao also found it a little strenuous right now. He was carrying someone, and had to keep climbing. At the same time, he had to resist the low temperature and the thinning air. There was also a lack of elemental power at such high altitudes. It was practically impossible for a soul master to replenish himself. Even if the milk bottle technique was advanced, it wasn't very helpful for a titled Doluo at his level. The best milk bottle was only Class 7. Currently, there wasn't a Class 8 milk bottle developed for a titled Doluo to use. The soul power requirements for a Class 8 milk bottle was simply too high. No material was currently able to support these requirements, leaving Class 7 the limit. Furthermore, a titled Doluo could recover faster by absorbing origin energy than by using a Class 7 milk bottle, so a true titled Doluo couldn't use a milk bottle to replenish himself. Milk bottles were useless to them. They were at 4,800 meters now. Dai Hao's flying speed was already very slow. At such an altitude, it was actually much brighter than it was on the ground. The stars were blinding amid such thin air. Spots of starlight filled the sky, and fell on Dai Hao and Huo Yuhao. There weren't any signs of any living organisms around them. At such a low temperature and amid such thin air, no one or thing could possibly survive. Between 4,800 meters and 4,900 meters, Dai Hao used 1 minute to ascend. In addition, his speed kept slowing down. Hey! Huo Yuhao heard a shout behind him. Following that, he felt his body lighten. Dai Hao's hands had disappeared, and a strong burst of soul power came from behind him. Huo Yuhao subconsciously lowered his head, and saw that the White Tiger Duke had turned into a huge white tiger. He had lifted Huo Yuhao up and let him sit on him. As he sat on the huge white tiger's back, Dai Hao rose faster and faster. In just a few breaths, he managed to surge beyond 5,000 meters, and was surging even further. Martial Soul True Body, White Tiger. The White Tiger Vajra transformation, and White Tiger's Devil God transformation were both unleashed. Right now, the White Tiger Duke had increased his cultivation to his strongest state to send Huo Yuhao further up into the air. Someone else was already taking such a great risk. How could he possibly not give his all? However, Dai Hao didn't know that Huo Yuhao was very conflicted right now. When he was young, Huo Yuhao had lived in the Duke's mansion with his mother and the servants. The White Tiger Duke's servants also had kids, and he would always watch as they were carried by their fathers, looking very blissful. When that happened, he would always ask his mother where his father was. When can I be carried by my father, just like them? Every time, his mother would always tell him that it would happen in the future, and that his father was very busy. He had waited for 20 years, just like that. Huo Yuhao didn't expect to be carried by his father in this lifetime. He was already tearing up. No matter how much he hated Dai Hao, he now deeply understood that he was right to have saved Dai Hao twice. The quiet night sky was extremely chilly. However, there was only warmth coming from the white tiger duke's fur. I can finally be carried by my father. A mother's love was boundless. What about a father's love? A father's love was always deep. Perhaps a father wasn't very good at expressing himself, but there was no doubt that a father's love was comparable to a mother's love. A father ran around outside to support his family. Perhaps he might be less caring, but how would there be a warm family without a father supporting it? 5,000 meters. Huo Yuhao was riding the white tiger duke, and finally managed to reach an altitude of 5,000 meters. He watched the soul tool that measured their altitude as he sensed the white tiger duke's surging soul power, filled with complex feelings. This was his father's back, wide and strong, and giving him a sense of security. Dai Hao, who had transformed into a white tiger, was still rising quickly. In just a few seconds, he managed to climb a few more 100 meters. The night sky was getting quieter. Right now, the lights that came from below them also became unclear. Everything around them was pitch black and cold. However, Huo Yuhao wasn't terrified at all. He didn't know why. It might have been because of Dai Hao, or for some other reason. Dim white light was shining from the white tiger duke's fur. The extremely low surrounding temperature also spurred Huo Yuhao to unleash his Ice Empress armor to protect himself from being frozen. The white tiger duke's aura was at its limit. Even though he didn't unleash it toward Huo Yuhao still felt slightly petrified. However, he felt as if some kind of energy in his body was being summoned just as he was petrified. This feeling was very weird. Huo Yuhao quickly found the source of this energy, blood. More accurately speaking, it was his lineage. It was the lineage that he had inherited from his father. When the white tiger duke unleashed his soul power to his full ability, the power of his own lineage rose along with his martial soul. Huo Yuhao shared the same blood as him, while his cultivation was also weaker than the white tiger duke's. Naturally, he was drawn by the white tiger duke's lineage. Blood is thicker than water. Given that they were directly related, the connection of their lineage was undoubtedly very close. Under such a situation, Huo Yuhao felt even closer to the white tiger duke. The circulation of the white tiger duke's blood was increasing quickly. Also, Huo Yuhao was astonished to realize that the white tiger duke's aura seemed to have some kind of weird power that was fusing into his body in streaks. His circulation was increasing quickly as this power fused into his body. As the weird power spread over him, Huo Yuhao's real eyes couldn't help but appear. To prevent the white tiger duke from finding out, he had no choice but to use his imitation to conceal them. Yuhao, the white tiger duke's voice sounded. Yes? Huo Yuhao was immediately jolted to his senses. I can send you to an altitude of almost 6,000 meters. If I continue to rise further, I'm afraid that you'll drain too much of your soul power when you glide over the mountains. My limit is around 5,800 to 6,000 meters. Do you think you need to reach a greater height? Huo Yuhao said, there's no need to. 5,500 meters is sufficient. All right then, prepare yourself. The white tiger duke's body started to shine even brighter. The glaring white lights engulfed Huo Yuhao's body and isolated him from the cold. He turned into a ball of intense white light that rose further into the sky. In an instant, they rose several hundred more meters. Huo Yuhao's eyes brightened, and his soul power surged, completely transforming into ultimate ice. Given his immense spiritual power, he could sense more than 1,000 meters around him, even without his spirit eyes. He knew that the white tiger's sudden outburst meant that the mission was about to begin. Indeed, the white light slowly retracted after a moment. The white tiger's momentum seemed to have stopped. The huge white tiger turned into a ball of light that surrounded Huo Yuhao. As the white light surged, the white tiger disappeared, and the white tiger duke had already returned to Huo Yuhao's back. He grabbed Huo Yuhao's waist and shouted, Yuhao, you must be careful and mind your safety. Don't be reckless. I'm going to send you in. Get ready. All right. Huo Yuhao simply acknowledged his words. His Ice Emperor's armor strengthened slightly, and a stalk of shiny and smooth star anise mysterious ice grass appeared on his shoulder. It released an icy blue aura around Huo Yuhao. The white tiger duke shouted, and the veins on his burly arms bulged. His explosive strength was instantly unleashed. He exerted strength from his waist and flung Huo Yuhao out. Huo Yuhao rolled up naturally in the air, and shot forward more than a few hundred meters like a grenade. As he shot forward, he slowly opened up his body like a big bird. A butterfly-shaped flying type soul tool opened up behind his back and stabilized his body in the air. The white tiger duke drifted in mid-air. After seeing that Huo Yuhao had stabilized his body and flown off into the distance, he heaved a sigh of relief. Before he personally witnessed it, he couldn't believe that Huo Yuhao could survive at such a high altitude even though he was only just a soul sage. His ultimate ice was indeed extraordinary. At this moment, the white tiger duke focused his gaze. He was stunned to discover that Huo Yuhao, who was within his field of view just earlier, had already disappeared. He had disappeared without a trace. Even with his acute senses as a title Doluor, he wasn't able to locate him. This kid. He's indeed unparalleled in his surveillance abilities. How did he manage to do this? Even if he possesses twin martial souls, shouldn't he be using his ultimate ice martial soul? How is he able to use his spiritual type martial soul at the same time? It was normal for the white tiger duke to be unable to comprehend this. He was still very unfamiliar with the newly discovered spirit system. Although Huo Yuhao was gifted, he couldn't use two martial souls at the same. However, it was different if he had a spirit. More accurately speaking, the Ice Empress was his martial soul. She wasn't considered his spirit. However, the star anise mysterious ice grass was a pure spirit. When the star anise mysterious ice grass appeared on Huo Yuhao's shoulder, it immediately had a protective effect on him. The extremely low temperature in the sky couldn't affect the ice grass, which favored low temperatures. In the thin air, there was only one element that was in abundance: ice. The ice grass tapped into this power after it appeared to create a layer of icy air around Huo Yuhao that helped to protect him. Huo Yuhao then changed his martial soul to his spirit eyes and unleashed them, melting into the night sky. The powerful effects of a spirit were immaculately demonstrated on Huo Yuhao, who had twin martial souls. He unleashed his butterfly wings, but Huo Yuhao didn't increase his speed to the maximum. After changing to his spirit eyes, the thin air continued to affect him, but not too badly. As for the external cold, he wasn't bothered at all. After he unleashed his spiritual power, he started to survey the lands below him. He suddenly realized that he enjoyed the feeling of this quiet night sky. Up here, no biological organism could survive for long. It was rare for any living organism to even attempt to reach such an altitude. He felt as if he were the only person in the world. Although it was lonely, there was still an exhilarating feeling of freedom. Up here, the restraints of the world didn't seem to be a problem anymore. His mood gradually entered an ethereal state. His soul power slowed down through a very special method, and his spiritual and soul power fused together perfectly. Right now, Huo Yuhao seemed to have entered an ascended state. It was like his first time in the Sun Moon Imperial Soul Engineering Academy, but it also felt like his first time looking at the boundless sea of clouds when he first climbed Clear Sky Peak. His body fused with nature, and a layer of dim golden light shone about him. The golden light was clear, as if he had become a star. It seemed like Huo Yuhao had become a part of the sky right now. The summoning feeling that he had once sensed in the spirit pagoda appeared once again. Perhaps it was because he was high up in the sky, but this summoning feeling was even clearer this time. Huo Yuhao suddenly felt that his entire world had turned golden. The pitch-black night sky was no longer dark. It was as if some special power of longing was about to descend from the sky onto his body. At this moment, a strong dark aura spread from his chest. A strong power of darkness spread, and a layer of thin scales appeared once again. The rise of this darkness jolted Huo Yuhao to his senses. He furrowed his brow and quickly exited his exalted state. Everything around him was still as dark as ever. There was no gold around him at all. A sarcastic smile appeared on Huo Yuhao's lips. Di Qian, it's you again. The great star dove forest. The clear lake of life suddenly surged. A ball of intense black light shot into the sky. A terrifying aura was immediately released and diffused into the air. Even the powerful soul beasts that lived in the slaughtering grounds were all shocked when they sensed this aura, immediately throwing themselves onto the ground like astonished little cats. The black light gradually retracted. Di Qian slowly appeared in mid-air. He had already turned pale, and his fists were clenched. His entire body was filled with a dangerous aura. Second time. This is already the second time. Why? Why is this so? I've been pursuing it for 800,000 years, but I've not obtained it. But it's already appeared twice on his body, summoning him. Why is this so unfair? Is it just because I'm a soul beast and he's a human? Finally, the highest peak of the Mingdo mountain range came into his field of view just as the detector on his wrist indicated that he was at an altitude of 3,600 meters. More accurately speaking, the highest peak came within the range of his spiritual detection. This was roughly the distance he had planned for. Huo Yuhao used his spirit eyes to observe his surroundings and made a simple estimation. He was now around 8 to 10 kilometers away from the highest mountain peak of the Mingdo mountain range. 10 kilometers was the upper limit of his unidirectional detection. However, he was high up in the sky, which affected the accuracy of his detection to some degree, and he could only make a conservative estimate. His butterfly wings curved in the air to aid him in gliding with the wind currents. Huo Yuhao controlled his flight and tried his best to drift in mid-air. On his forehead, his eye of destiny slowly opened under the stimulus of his spiritual power. Clear rose gold light flashed slightly, and a huge vertically pupilled eye appeared behind Huo Yuhao. To raise the effectiveness of his spiritual detection, he needed the help of his eye of destiny. Without any hindrance, Huo Yuhao's first and second soul rings lit up at the same time. Under the effect of his imitation, all the light that he released was assimilated into his surroundings. It made him look like a ball of air that could generate soul power and spiritual undulations. His immense spiritual power cut through the sky like an invisible ray of light. It went straight toward the highest peak of the Mingdo mountain range. According to his understanding of the death god's effective range was roughly 5,000 meters, coincidentally outside the range of Huo Yuhao's spiritual detection. In this case, he wouldn't be in much danger even if he was discovered on his way back. After all, a titled Doluo would still need some time to catch up with Huo Yuhao, given the speed he was capable of. By the time that happened, he would have returned to the territory controlled by the Star Luo Empire, and people would be there to reinforce him. However, Huo Yuhao's expression turned serious after a brief moment. This was because he was stunned to discover that his spiritual detection was blocked off by an invisible barrier when it was only 1,000 meters from the highest peak. After this, his spiritual detection dissipated. The barrier was even shaking slightly. This wasn't some protective barrier created from soul power. It was a real, spiritual barrier. Strong spiritual power. Don't tell me that this was generated from a soul tool. Huo Yuhao was shocked. Although there were soul tools that could enhance one's spiritual power, they were very rare. Furthermore, the extent of the increase was limited. Otherwise, Huo Yuhao would have equipped himself with one. Even though his spiritual power didn't penetrate the barrier earlier, he could still clearly sense that a massive spiritual barrier covered the entire highest peak of the Mingdo mountain range. There weren't any loopholes. This meant that he had to overcome this barrier before he could perform any surveillance. Huo Yuhao couldn't guess who had erected such a powerful and sturdy spiritual barrier. At the very least, a spiritual type soul master with the powers of an 8-ringed soul Doluo was needed to mount such a defense. More importantly, the area that it covered was simply too huge. The amount of spiritual power drained to erect such a spiritual barrier had to be incredible. Among all the powerful individuals that Huo Yuhao knew, only the evil-eyed tyrant king was so specialized in spiritual power and possessed such terrifying spiritual strength. However, the Sun-Moon Empire couldn't possibly have engaged the evil-eyed tyrant king's help, no matter how influential it was. This was why he deduced that a few spiritual and defensive-type soul tools were being used to protect the highest peak of the mountain range. The Sun-Moon Empire's knowledge of soul tools has actually reached such a level. No matter how much Huo Yuhao had overestimated them earlier, he couldn't help but be shocked right now. At this moment, he saw a streak of light on the highest peak. It was an object that resembled a spire. Although it was very far away, Huo Yuhao could still see it clearly. That spire-like object came from the top of the mountain peak. After that, it quickly grew upward. Very quickly, it was more than 10 meters high. The top of it flashed with glowing metal. Suddenly, a bright, white halo spread from that spire-like object, projected towards Huo Yuhao. The white halo quickly spread, after moving away from the spire-like object. It kept on growing, as if it were a rising tidal wave. This video will end here. Low-pitched roars echoed in the Great Star Doe forest. However, no one could answer Di Qian's question. Di Qian gradually calmed down. However, his expression was still as gloomy as ever. No matter what, I won't let you complete it. As long as my reverse scale is in you, you can only remain in this world and protect the fortune of the Great Star Doe forest. After you die, I'll use some methods to make you transfer the power of destiny to a soul beast, and further the fortune of the Great Star Doe forest. Di Qian looked a little hesitant as he muttered to himself. If not for the fact that he couldn't use brute force to make destiny submit to him, he would have killed Huo Yuhao long ago. However, the power of destiny could only be transferred willingly, it couldn't be taken by force. No matter how strong Di Qian was, he couldn't challenge the laws of the world. He could only wait while protecting Huo Yuhao. After snapping out of his contemplative state, Huo Yuhao looked very calm once more. This wasn't Di Qian's first time hindering him. However, he had also used his actions to prove to his spirits that searching for that feeling wasn't so difficult. This actually wasn't the second time. More accurately speaking, it was the third time. It was just because he was too invested earlier on, which stopped him from controlling his own sensations. Otherwise, he might not have been discovered by Di Qian this time, either. His gaze suddenly turned sharp. He summoned all his soul power and poured it into his flying-type soul tool. Suddenly, all of his soul tool's ports started to circulate at full speed, thrusting him forward like a streak of flowing light. He charged towards the Mingdo mountain range at lightning-quick speed. Huo Yuhao was still 5,000 meters in the air right now, and finally tapped into his own soul power to fly. It was also now that he finally felt the burden of moving at such a high altitude. He was still using his soul power to propel his soul tool, but he was drained 3 times as quickly as normal. His flying-type soul tool seemed to be affected by the low temperature and thin air and was quickly drained. At the same time, Huo Yuhao had no choice but to use his soul power to change the speed of his blood circulation in order to maintain the necessary functions of his own body. Concurrently, he filtered the thin air and absorbed what he could into his body. These processes drained him even further. Flying at an altitude of 5,000 meters, he was naturally unafraid of being spotted by the Sun-Moon Empire. However, Huo Yuhao clearly understood that even a titled Doluo couldn't withstand being at such a high altitude for long. If not for his flying-type soul tool, he couldn't possibly fly here, given his abilities as a soul sage. In less than half a minute, Huo Yuhao's soul power was drained by almost 20%. If he continued flying like this, he couldn't possibly reach the Mingdo mountain range. His butterfly-winged flying-type soul tool's ports stopped working under Huo Yuhao's control. He couldn't sustain this any longer. If he continued to do so, he couldn't possibly complete his mission. After he shut the ports, he continued to maintain his flying speed. However, he was slowly descending as he glided towards the Mingdo mountain range. This had always been his plan. Descending from such a great height was completely in contrast with ascending into the sky. The pressure that he had to bear was naturally dipping, and he didn't need to use his soul power to fly anymore. He was in a much better position now. Huo Yuhao continuously used his spiritual detection to observe everything below him. At the same time, he kept an eye on the detector on his wrist. Above 3,000 meters was a safe height to remain at, a height where he would still remain undetected. This surveillance mission involved a few critical risks. Comparatively speaking, getting closer to the Mingdo mountain range was actually the safest part. This was because Huo Yuhao could remove any soul power undulations by shutting his flying-type soul tool off and using his imitation to conceal himself. With the help of his star anise mysterious ice grass, his body temperature was also regulated to a temperature identical to the air. Unless oscillation detectors were used, there weren't any soul tools that could possibly detect his presence. Oscillation detectors were usually very short range. They couldn't possibly detect anything 3,000 meters up in the sky. On the other hand, there were two different times that would be the most dangerous. The first would be when Huo Yuhao unleashed his spiritual detection and tried to survey the area around the death god. The second period would be when he retreated. During the process of retreating, he would need some thrust, which could only be achieved through unleashing his soul power. His imitation couldn't possibly remove all traces of his soul power undulations, it could only conceal them to the best of his ability. As for the Sun Moon Empire's soul power detectors, Huo Yuhao wasn't certain whether he would be detectable by them. After all, he hadn't obtained any information about the soul tools that the Sun Moon Empire had installed in the Mingdo mountain range. As he drew closer and closer, he was also descending through the air. From 5,000 to 4,000 meters, he was able to see lights coming from the ground as the pressure on him lessened. At this moment, the Star Luo Empire started to launch their attack to cover the traces of his surveillance. Balls of light could be seen being unleashed toward the Mingdo mountain range. These balls of lights also helped Huo Yuhao determine the position of the Mingdo mountain range and more accurately locate his target. Even given Huo Yuhao's abilities as a soul sage and a possessor of twin martial souls, he found it difficult to fly without using a flying-type soul tool. So he was very cautious in the control of his butterfly-winged flying-type soul tool. During the process of gliding, he used the wind currents to maintain his altitude.